There is a strange kind of loneliness that happens when you can love someone deeply, but your feelings refuse to arrive on schedule. You can spend months becoming emotionally close to someone. You trust them. You laugh with them. You tell them things you rarely tell anyone else. And then one day they look at you differently. They want romance. They want an answer. And suddenly the friendship that felt safe starts feeling like a countdown. Because for a demisexual person, attraction may not appear simply because someone is attractive, available, interested, or romantically interested in them. It can emerge only after emotional connection has formed. And that creates a brutal contradiction. The person who makes you feel safest may also become the person you are most afraid of disappointing. Because friendship can feel like home. Romance can feel like a demand. And sometimes, you don't know which one you're actually losing. The strange part is that from the outside, the situation can look simple. Two people are close. One develops romantic feelings. The other isn't sure. So everyone expects a decision. Yes, no, maybe. But internally, it isn't that simple. Because the demisexual experience can involve a completely different emotional timeline. The connection comes first. The attraction, if it comes at all, may come later. And modern dating culture is almost designed around the opposite assumption. Swipe first, attraction first, chemistry first, then emotional connection. Dating apps turn strangers into potential partners before they have even become emotionally meaningful. People are expected to know whether they are attracted to someone after a few photographs, a conversation, or one coffee. But what happens when your brain doesn't work that way? You may look at someone and think, they're objectively attractive. They're interesting. They're kind. They like me. And still feel nothing romantic. Not because you're broken. Not because you're secretly afraid of love. Not because you're playing games. The emotional connection simply hasn't become strong enough. And this is where the trap begins. Because when someone likes you romantically, you can start monitoring yourself. You begin asking questions that should never have become an emotional interrogation. Do I like them enough? Should I feel something by now? Am I leading them on? What if I never develop attraction? What if I lose them because I can't decide? Now friendship stops being completely innocent. Every interaction becomes evidence. A hug becomes something to analyze. A late-night conversation becomes something to interpret. A moment of jealousy becomes a psychological investigation. Even missing them can become confusing, because missing someone doesn't automatically mean you want a relationship with them. Caring deeply isn't the same as romantic attraction. Emotional intimacy isn't automatically sexual attraction. And friendship can be profoundly intimate without needing to become romance. But modern culture constantly collapses these categories. If two people are emotionally close, people assume something must be happening. If you spend every weekend together, someone asks if you're dating. If you defend each other, people call it chemistry. If you are emotionally dependent on each other, people assume you're secretly in love. Eventually, you can start questioning your own feelings through other people's expectations. And that creates something darker. Emotional self-surveillance. You stop experiencing the relationship and start auditing it. You watch yourself. You analyze your reactions. You search for signs. You compare your feelings to what you're supposed to feel. And the more you monitor attraction, the harder it can become to simply experience connection naturally. That's one of the cruelest contradictions. You may need emotional safety before attraction can emerge. But pressure can destroy the emotional safety that attraction needs. Think about what happens when your friend finally says, "I have feelings for you." Now every interaction carries consequences. If you laugh too much, maybe you're flirting. If you text first, maybe you're giving them hope. If you pull away, maybe you're rejecting them. If you stay close, maybe you're leading them on. Suddenly, nothing feels neutral anymore. The friendship becomes emotionally radioactive. And you may start distancing yourself. Not because you don't care. Because you care too much to keep pretending you know what you feel. This is where people can misunderstand demisexuality in particularly painful ways. They may interpret uncertainty as manipulation. They may think, "If you really liked me, you'd know." But attraction doesn't always operate like a decision. You can't force your nervous system to produce a feeling because another person deserves clarity. You can choose honesty. You can choose boundaries. You can choose respect. But you cannot manufacture attraction on command. And sometimes that truth hurts both people. Because the other person may have been waiting, hoping, interpreting every intimate moment as evidence that romance was coming. Meanwhile, you may have been thinking, "I just really value this person." Those two realities can exist at the same time. And neither person has to be the villain. That's what makes this situation so emotionally complicated. There isn't always betrayal. Sometimes there is simply asymmetry. One person experiences closeness as friendship. The other experiences the same closeness as the beginning of love. Same conversations. Same memories. Same relationship. Completely different emotional meanings. And when those meanings collide, someone usually feels misunderstood. The demisexual person may feel pressured to turn intimacy into romance. The other person may feel trapped in emotional ambiguity. And both can become exhausted. This is also where fear of replaceability can enter. You might wonder, if I don't become their partner, will they eventually leave? That question can make friendship feel like a negotiation. You may secretly fear that refusing romance means losing the friendship entirely. So you start wondering whether you should try dating them simply because losing them feels worse. And that's dangerous. Because loneliness can make compatibility look different. When someone is emotionally important to you, the fear of losing them can masquerade as romantic desire. You don't necessarily want the relationship. You want the person to stay. Those are not the same thing. And sometimes the hardest realization is this. You can desperately want someone in your life, without wanting them as your partner. Modern culture doesn't always know what to do with that. It wants categories. Friend. Partner. Hookup. Situationship. Everything needs a label. But some connections exist in emotional territory that doesn't fit neatly into the boxes people expect. And demisexual people can become especially vulnerable to feeling that they have to choose a category before their emotions have finished developing. So they rush. They perform certainty. They say yes because saying "I don't know" feels cruel. They say no because pressure makes attraction impossible to recognize. Or they disappear because disappearing feels easier than explaining an emotional timeline nobody around them understands. And underneath all of this is one devastating fear. What if the way I experience attraction means I will always arrive too late? Too late for dating. Too late for romance. Too late for someone who needed certainty sooner. Too late for the person who waited for feelings that never came. But perhaps the real problem isn't that demisexual people feel too slowly. Perhaps modern relationships demand emotional answers too quickly. A culture obsessed with instant chemistry can make gradual attraction look defective. A culture obsessed with constant accessibility can make emotional boundaries look like rejection. And a culture obsessed with romantic coupling can make deep friendship feel incomplete. But it isn't incomplete. Sometimes friendship isn't the waiting room before romance. Sometimes friendship is the relationship. And sometimes romance genuinely grows from it. And sometimes it doesn't. The painful part is accepting that you cannot know which one it will become simply because someone wants an answer. You can only be honest about what exists now, because forcing romance out of friendship doesn't create intimacy. It creates performance. And pretending attraction exists because you are afraid of losing someone can eventually destroy the very connection you were trying to protect. Maybe the deepest emotional trap isn't being caught between friendship and romance. Maybe it's believing you have to turn one into the other to make the connection legitimate. You don't. You are allowed to care without craving, to love without labeling, to need someone without dating them, to develop attraction slowly, and to discover that sometimes the person who changed your emotional world was never meant to become your romantic partner. They were simply someone you were deeply connected to, and that connection was real, even without becoming something else. Because the most painful truth is also the most freeing one. Not every profound connection is unfinished romance. Some connections are complete, exactly as they are.